Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Collab, SpacetoCo's free monthly online sessions designed to assist those working in community venues to learn, upskill, and be inspired to do their work more effectively and efficiently. We hope you find these sessions useful for the important work you do in our local communities. For those who are watching this recording after this live event, hello, and we hope you get valuable knowledge from this session. My name is Carmela, and I organize these monthly learning series. So just a little bit about SpacetoCo before we move on. So our mission in SpacetoCo is to help community venues be a thriving hub in their communities. We do so by providing opportunities to be able to grow bookings, increase community engagement, as well as support. We also create and provide free resources for those working in community venues. SpacetoCo is a two-sided marketplace where you can list your spaces where guests can find and book them online. It is also an efficient booking system tool where you can reduce your admin by 80%. We work with a number of local governments as well as community centers across Australia and New Zealand. So for today's session, we will be hearing from one of our Australian SpacetoCo hosts. We'll be delving into the topic of maximizing community benefit by effectively managing your spaces, where we'll be going through what it means to develop a vision for your space and aligning policy and practice in achieving your vision, plus using pricing to drive positive community outcomes and how to deal with tricky situations. So we're so stoked to have Susan Rennie with us. She has been the center manager for Jika Jika Community Centre since 2022. She is a seasoned community leader, a Durban city councillor, and former mayor of Durban. Susan is more than a manager, she's a dedicated community builder. Susan was drawn to Jika Jika by the chance to change lives and deliver the perfect mix of practical and strategic work. She loves seeing the friendships growing within Jika Jika and being their local melting pot that welcomes everybody. So we welcome to the collab, Susan.
Hi, Carmela. Thank you for that introduction and welcome everyone. So as Carmela said, I'm Susan Rennie and I'm the manager at Jika Jika Community Centre. We're located in Northcote, which is an inner suburb of Melbourne. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're on Wurundjeri land. It's the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respect to their elders past and present and recognise that this is unceded land. In fact, the name of our centre, Jika Jika, comes from Bilibileri, who was a Wurundjeri elder and ancestor who attempted to negotiate a treaty with Batman at the time of invasion. And we often ponder how different things might have been if there had been a treaty, and support the current treaty process in Victoria. So we love our little neighbourhood house. You'll learn more about it as I go through this presentation. But I think you've got my screen share, and so this is the message that you're greeted with when you get to Jika, which is beautiful. Welcome to Jika Jika sign sewn by our sewing group, which is one of the activities that takes place here. In thinking about our space, we thought about our strategic plan, which was redone last year, and what we're trying to achieve, which is very much a thriving local community rich with possibility and belonging. And our space is a key way of achieving this. Our purpose is to nurture social connection, inclusivity, opportunities for community participation and human friendship. So we very much see ourselves as a centre which is about reducing loneliness and building social connection in our community. This is reflected in our values around reflection and thoughtfulness, inclusivity, inclusiveness and respect. And we have some goals that you can see there on the screen, which include increasing grant revenue and maximising value from partnerships, improving how we communicate so more people walk through our doors, and delivering on the Defence Against Loneliness project, which I'll speak a little bit about, to increase the beauty, visibility and access at Jika Jika. And all of this wouldn't happen if we weren't also focused on strengthening organisational structures and building the capacity of our team of staff and volunteers. So as I said, we're not a big centre. But part of what we've been doing is actually reimagining the space at Jika. So I've been in my role for about 2 years, just a month over, I think now. And this is what Jika Jika Community Centre looked like when I arrived. So you can see that it's looking very green, but also it looks very well protected. It's a bit hard to see what's going on in there. And in fact, when you look at this, if you're familiar with council facilities in Melbourne, you're probably thinking it's a kindergarten or a childcare centre, because these type of fences are very sort of reflective of kinders, and childcare centres tend to have these sort of fences. So whilst it is green, it doesn't invite people in, and that's something that I realised quite quickly we had to think about if we wanted to be open to more community members. In fact, I had a number of people say to me that they'd lived around the corner for the last decade and they'd never come in because they thought it was a kinder. So we started rethinking this, and this is just a tiny project that we undertook. So this is that corner that you could see before, and we stripped back a lot of the plants, and we actually just shifted the fence by flipping it off the corner. I'll just take you back so you can see again. So here was that corner, same corner with the same tree. And we've taken the fence and flipped it the other side of the tree and put a bench that people can sit on. And I can't begin to tell you how lovely it was within minutes of finishing the bench to look out of my window and see people sitting on it. So right up front, just the way in which we presented the space had an impact on the engagement that people had. Similarly, here was the side fence. And we experienced some tensions in the space between people who wanted the gate open and people who wanted the gate closed. So as an example, on Wednesday mornings, we have a lot of families that use this courtyard, and they use it because their kids are doing dance classes, preschool and kinder ballet in our large hall. And so while they're kids are doing kinder ballet, a lot of smaller toddlers are, in the courtyard. But we also have a fresh food program where we deliver food security services to people, and that program attracts a lot of older people, many of whom have walking frames and wheelchairs. And so there was a tension between the gate being open and closed, with the parents continually shutting the gate, and we kept continually trying to prop it open so that people would actually come in unaided. And we also rethought this, and so actually now the fence is gone. And this is our project that we've called Defence Against Loneliness. So it was a recognition that fences inherently actually create barriers, and while they create a sense also of safety for some users, they create a barrier to access. Our Defence Against Loneliness project is not finished, it's halfway through. So we're working with an artist to reimagine the way in which the centre presents. These flags that you can see around the outside at the moment are a temporary measure because we didn't want people tripping over the uneven surface between the footpath and the centre. They are gradually coming down, and along some of the boundary, but not all, there will be a work of art in laser cut steel that an artist is working on, as well as a brand new street library, which is temporarily sitting next to the tree there, looking a bit rickety, but that will be recreated. And so one of the things we're thinking about at Jika Jika Community Centre is placemaking. And that is the idea that by working with your community on the way in which the space presents, you can fundamentally shift the way in which people use space. And now when you're in the courtyard, it's presenting much more like a little piazza or a little cafe where you don't have to buy the coffee, you can just come in and make one for yourself, but it really says people are welcome. And if you imagine back to what we had before, which was this, there was no way someone was going to wander in off the street through that gate without feeling invited. Now, at the back of that courtyard, what you might be having a little bit of trouble seeing is there's a whole lot of wooden tables and chairs, and people can actually wander in and just sit down. And, I dropped by one weekend to drop something off and found, a mother and a daughter sitting at those tables using the colouring books and just enjoying the space. And so that's what placemaking is all about, creating physical changes in consultation with your community and informed by your community that change the way in which people engage with the space. So inside, the space has also changed a bit. This was some time ago. It was very, sorry, I should have worked out how to switch off that phone. Very, very cluttered. And those large doors to the large hall, you can't really see what's happening in there. So now we have this sort of different look in the foyer. It's much less cluttered. We've become much more careful about what goes up on the board. It's not a free-for-all. It's specifically to let people know about our activities. And we've also put these glass panels in the doors to the large hall. Partly that's been informed by child safe standards, which mandate that if someone is working in a room with children, that people should be able to see into that room. But also it really, enables people to get a sense of what's happening in the space. All of this stuff doesn't kind of happen by accident. There's quite significant thought that goes into how we create spaces that feel inviting when people step in. This was the street library initially, so whilst it's incredibly well used, it does look a little bit like you're stepping into a cage. It was on the outside. This will be completely open around the other side. So that's one of our parts of this project called Defence Against Loneliness that we're most excited about, is the street library will be bigger and much more inviting. I had no idea how much a street library could be used. We have a lot of community members stopping all the time to add books and take books out, and we keep it very well stocked. So in order to realise the full potential of our assets, we had to actually develop some principles that informed how we were going to use them. And, that meant that really right up front, we said we will always prioritise community use, and particularly activities that are presented by Jika Jika Community Centre, which are free or very low cost. So it would be really easy for us to say we will hire our spaces out 24/7 all the time and just be a venue for hire. We do not want to just be a venue for hire. We have a critical role in activating the space ourselves. And I think before I arrived, there was a little bit of a tendency towards that, we're a venue for hire, and a whole lot of staff time was tied up in the administration of just renting out rooms to people with whom we had no connection. We also need to care for the spaces so that they're clean, welcoming, well-maintained and accessible. And we have changed our staffing mix in the last couple of years to actually employ a neighbourhood housekeeper. So when I arrived here, we had a cleaner who was external. They were a contract cleaner. They were employed 5 hours a week. They came in before we started and did a pretty mediocre job of cleaning the place. They had no investment in the centre, and they had no sense of how it was used. So they didn't see the kinder ballet in the large hall. They didn't understand that it was important that the floor was clean because people were lying on that floor doing Pilates or yoga classes. And so we actually got rid of the contract cleaners, and we created a new position of a neighbourhood housekeeper. And that neighbourhood housekeeper is not just a cleaner. They are someone whose role is to make the space feel inviting. And part of that's about cleaning, but partly it's about attention to detail and thinking about how things present. And we've created that role 9 hours a week. So we've added a little bit of time, but that person is in while the staff are here. And it does mean we have to clean around people who are using things, but it's fundamentally shifted the relationship between the way in which we maintain the space and the sense of purpose about why it's being maintained. And it's been an amazing shift. And it's absolutely lovely to see that our neighbourhood housekeeper is often in the courtyard tidying things up and stopping and engaging with community members so that people are talking to her. And she's a champion for our centre and for the things that happen here. She's really well connected. She's local. And because she's so local, she was happy to do 3 3-hour shifts a week. So it's been an absolute win for her, for our community and for us. We ensure that the community can access all the spaces in ways which are transparent, fair and underpinned by social justice principles. So that is quite explicit, and we say on the SpacetoCo site that people who are from not-for-profits or community groups can have a discounted rate if they get in touch. Many of our hirers, and I'll talk a bit more about this, are regulars, so they've actually signed up as verified users and they can self-book. And when they do that, we put them into a pricing category that reflects the sort of use that they're putting the space to. Importantly, we also look for opportunities to leverage community uses to build on the benefits derived from people attending Jika Jika Community Centre, and particularly to promote social connection and cohesion. So what this means is that when someone hires the space, and particularly for people who hire the space regularly, we don't just want them coming in and going out and not connecting with us. And so where it's appropriate, you know, we have a number of disability groups or groups of people with acquired brain injuries. Where it's appropriate, we go in and we tell them also about things that we are running, so that they're not just coming in for their NDIS funded program, but they have a real sense of connectedness to space. And that's been fantastic, to go in and tell people that we have a monthly community dinner, and then to see some of those people who are there for that venue hire activity to actually come back for our community dinner. That's what we want to see more of. And we really enjoy it when the facilitators of those groups actually understand the value add from being here, that it's not just a commercial hall hire kind of opportunity, that when people come here for those groups, they can be linked in with our food security program, they can be linked in with our art classes, they can become volunteers in our centre. So in terms of what spaces we have available, I thought you might be interested to know that we've got a large hall, we have a small hall, we have a community room at a second little venue called Jika in the Park, which is 500 metres from our main venue, and we have a meeting room. And the meeting room is another sort of example of the work that we've done making the spaces available. So when I arrived, the meeting room was largely used as the storage junk space. So the stuff that we were trying to store spread across half the room, and it wasn't actually a usable space at all. Now, we've built a huge kind of built-in cupboard. We've put everything in the cupboard. The cupboard's lockable. We've put a meeting table in that room, and it can be used by people. And that's been fantastic to see that it's now also useful for us, but for groups that want to do a small board meeting or have a discussion group, they can come and use that space. So across all of the activities that take place in these different spaces, the 4 spaces are booked on average for about 120 hours each week. So there would almost always be someone here from 9 a.m. in the morning until 9 p.m. at night, 7 days a week, if you sort of combined the different spaces that are available. And quite often we have, in the evening when we're not staffed, we have groups in both the large hall and the small hall. So I thought it would be good to show some photos. So this is our large hall. Here is the small hall. This is the community room. You can't see most of the rooms behind. It's not a very big space, but it's got access to this absolutely beautiful courtyard. And to give you a sense of how these spaces are used, there's a lot of creative activities that take place. I won't read through all of these because you can see them on the screen, but a lot of creative activities, a number of healing and recovery type of activities, health and fitness activities, and programs that are intended to generate community connection and social support, as well as social justice and environmental programs. And these are things we really want to promote. We're quite explicit in the booking. We do ask people if their activities comply with equal opportunity and human rights legislation. We don't want activities that are not consistent with that taking place in our centre. And I can talk about one instance where we became aware that a group was booking the space and they had values that were inconsistent with our values. They were kind of anti-vax, right-wing conspiracy theorist kind of group, but they presented to us when they first booked as a community group that liked gardening, and it was only when we subsequently saw some of their marketing that we understood who they were, and that's a really tricky situation. But because they had presented as a community group and asked for that community discount, we were able to withdraw the discount and have different insurance requirements, which basically pushed them out of our space because When you have, they're also transphobic. When you have a group like that that books your space, it makes the space less safe for the groups who you want to have feel included. And, that is a tricky one in terms of how you navigate that. I see that someone asked how many FTE we have allocated to the running centre. So we've got about 2.6 EFT, all spread across part-time staff. So when I started, there was a staff member who spent almost all of her 20 hours a week managing hall hires and answering questions about hall hire. That was not good use of a resource. We now spend a lot less time on the logistics of managing space and a lot more time. In fact, we've got rid of the 20-hour-a-week admin role, and in its place, we've put in a community development role. Here are some photos of some of the activities taking place. On the left, soap making in the small hall, and on the right, bird making with recycled materials in the large hall, more soap making at Jika in the park, and I could show you lots of other photos, but you can look at our Facebook page or website if you'd like to see that. One of the other components of managing space and making sure that we really prioritise community uses is to vary the pricing. So if you were to jump on our booking page, you would get the commercial kind of pricing, and that's not what most people pay, but that is what some casuals who are private users do pay, varying from $20 an hour for the little meeting room to $50 an hour for the large hall. But right up front, it says that if you're a not-for-profit or community use, there's a discount available if people get in touch. Interestingly, not many casual users actually ask for that. Sometimes we apply it to groups that haven't even asked, because I sort of look at the booking and think, this is a group that really is a community use. We'd like to charge them a bit less. The large hall comes right down to $20 an hour instead of $50 for community users, and that occurs when people are offering an event that is accessible to all people and that doesn't charge anything or charges only a gold coin donation to cover the cost of the booking. So essentially what we're saying to groups is you can have the very cheapest rate if no one running the group is making a living or charging for the facilitation, and if the cost that you're charging people is simply to cover the hall hire. And so that's what happens with our 12-step groups and also some other community programs that are run by volunteers. So if a volunteer wants to use the space to offer a free activity to people, we try and make that absolutely possible, because there is no better use from our point of view than having someone come into the space as a volunteer and run free activities or almost free activities for other people. And we really want to enable that. We had a parent and a child come to us and say, my kid wants to run a disco. We'd like to use the space to have a kids' disco after school. And when they first came to us, they sort of booked casually without thinking to ask. And it was only through that discussion we said, well, if what you're running is a free disco for kids after school, we want to enable that. We want to make sure that's something that's sustainable, and that as the parent who's trying to facilitate that activity for children locally, you're not out of pocket, because if that parent is out of pocket trying to run a kids' disco, they won't sustain it. They won't keep it up for months and months. It won't become a regular part of the activity. But because we've made the space available more cheaply, that's become a regular activity, and that's something we can then promote to the community and say, there's a kids' disco every Monday afternoon at Jika Jika Community Centre. We often also make the space available for free. So when the voice referendum was on last year, we were really clear that any group wanting to use the space to promote activities that promoted a yes to the voice referendum would have access to the space for free, and we'll continue to offer free space for reconciliation activities. We've also offered free space to other activist activities, because we explicitly promote and encourage activism in our community. We think it's really important to building social justice to have people who don't just seek to run activities, but who actually seek to challenge the status quo in terms of where power and privilege are held in our society. And so we've offered free venue space to the Rainbow Community Angels. We've offered free venue space to Streets Alive Darraman that are looking to promote active travel and run campaigns. And that's because I don't think that campaigners should have to dig deep into their pockets to fund activities as well as actually just doing the work that they're doing. There we are. I've talked about some of those free activities that have taken place. And, you know, like many people, we have legacy issues. So we've got a Greek women's group that's been meeting here for the last 30 years. They're women in their 80s. Their husbands were a bit controlling, didn't want them meeting in each other's homes. They started meeting here. They continue to meet here. They wouldn't know how to book, and we're not going to make them. So we just have the space available for the Greek women's group who wander in every Monday and meet up here. And I think that's lovely as well. And, you know, they're part of our local neighbourhood. So just to finish up, a lovely photo of some of our crew at Jika Jika. And, you know, people in our outdoor courtyard. You can see how that's a really beautiful space. You can still see in this photo the fence up behind people, but the fence has now come down, and that process is still being undertaken. We were very fortunate with our Defence Against Loneliness project to get a significant grant from the state government's Living Local Suburban Development program to undertake that work and to be working with an artist on rethinking the presentation. So I think that's all that I've got formally. I would love to answer any questions that you have and get into some discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Susan. That was awesome. First of all, I'm sorry I pronounced Jika Jika, the name, wrong. But I think some things that I found like so awesome was to see and know that you have the courage to do what you need to for your community venue to align your center to your vision and mission for the community. As you said, like, it's not just a hall for hire, and you didn't want to just be a hall for hire. So you guys just, you know, you didn't stop either like not having funding or whatever to either just change the space a little bit to make it more inviting for the community. Even the fact that you took off the fence. And I think the biggest thing for me has been the great involvement in getting to know your community by giving groups access, even if they don't ask. So even that you said, right, like you were like, oh, I don't know this, even if they haven't asked for a discount, this group has asked for like a booking, but they seem like somebody, a group, and their initiative seems like someone that you give a discount to, you give it anyway. So you take the initiative to offer opportunities for them, which I think has been like awesome. Yeah, we have awesome comments in the chat as well that have said you had great ideas for them to use. So thank you so much. Again, this is the time for Q&A. So if you did have any questions, please feel free to chuck it in the chat or the Q&A tab, and I'll ask it on behalf of you guys to Susan. One of the things that have popped up in even in the icebreaker has been, what did you find has been the most effective tactic for engaging the community in your experiences so far?
I think probably the work that we've been doing on defencing, and you know, that's been challenging, and it came with some difficult conversations when we first started consulting with centre users. A lot of the parents who had kids were really concerned about the fence coming down. They didn't like the idea at all, to be frank. They said no, you know, kids' safety and a whole lot of that kind of narrative. I think we had to believe in what we were doing and have the courage to say, well, actually, we are juggling competing uses here, and we have to be really clear that more than anything, we're valuing accessibility. But also, to be honest, what we saw in the courtyard when the gate was closed was not ideal in terms of management of the space. So, you know, because the gate, when the gate was closed, it felt really secure. It felt like a space where parents didn't have to watch their kids. And so we had a lot of parents on their phones or devices because we've got free Wi-Fi's available. And we had a lot of kids running all over the place. We have a sand pit. We have sand spread throughout the venue, which was driving us mad. It still does a bit. But, you know, when children are largely unsupervised and left to their own devices, they have a lovely time. But also The toys were left strewn across the yard. The kids would run around. And, just last week without the fence, what we noticed is the parents were sitting in a semicircle at the end of the playground, because there's still a part where you can't move from next to the sandpit. We've retained a bit of fence at the moment while we're waiting for the artwork to arrive. But the parents were sitting down the end in a semicircle chatting while the kids were at the other end. And it just felt much nicer in terms of the engagement of people in the space. And I was expecting, when the fence came down, to cop a bit more flack from the community, to be honest. I was expecting to get more grumbles. And I think that it looked so much better and it looked so much more inviting without a fence, that even the parents who'd been reluctant to see the fence come down, even those who had spoken against that, suddenly walked in, and it's kind of like it was this light bulb moment. I get it. I get why the fence needed to come down. I now understand what they were trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's awesome. We have Carrie Jeffries asking on the chat. She said, "Hi, thanks so much for sharing. I love that you actively promote activism in your community." She asked, "Do you promote or state this, or is it word of mouth as people approach you? We do something similar, and it's curious to know how others do it."
I think it's a little bit of both, because we do have in our vision, the idea of creating social justice, I think, is really part of what we do, and has been for a long time. So I think the centre is pretty well embedded in the community, and lots of people have a connection to it. And so there's a knowledge generally as a space that we promote social justice causes, and we do that on our social media. So, we were explicit in our promotion, our support for Yes in the referendum campaign. We are explicit in our support for Ida Hobbit Day, for the Week Without Violence. And I think because in our social media and in our newsletter, we explicitly promote those kind of social causes, because that groups tend to know that if they come to us, or if they want to sort of engage in the space in that way, that would be good. So during the referendum, we had a banner painting evening for people who were going on the Yes rally. And, those type of activities, when people see them coming up a fair bit, it tends to create this knowledge in the community that that this is somewhere those type of activities will be welcomed.
Awesome. We have Ian, who asked, "How do you manage access and keys for after hours usage?"
So we have a key safe. We have a key safe at both of our venues, around in the park and here. I would have to say I suspect this is one of the least secure venues in all of Northcote, because I'm convinced that half of Northcote knows the code to the key safe. We try and change it annually, but also I'm really convinced, one of the things people said, what about security when you take the fence down? And it's kind of like, well, the reality is the gate was never locked. And behind that high fence that you saw initially, anything could have been taking place. In fact, we've got a well-lit courtyard, and now the neighbours who surround us can actually see more. But our very best security is the fact that from 9 a.m. in the morning until 9 p.m. and every day, 7 days a week, there's people using the building. That is what creates security. And we love having the key safe. It makes it really easy. People get sent the code when they get their booking. In fact, can I just say we have 2 key safes. We have a second one in case someone accidentally takes home one, and so we don't get caught out.
Yeah, it's always good to have you. Awesome. We have Pauline asking, "How do community members communicate ideas for placemaking or activities to you?"
Thank you for that question, Pauline. We, I think, have really open channels of communication with people. So we have a morning tea when people come in. We enable people to give us feedback via our website or in the centre. And you know, my natural inclination when asked absolutely anything is to say yes. So, you know, the default position is yes, and then we'll actually work back and think, well, how do we make this idea happen? And I think that because the default position is yes, and people tend to know that, so we're not risk averse. And I think a big part of being open is not being too risk averse. I love the fact that we're a very small community organisation with we're an incorporated association legally and have a committee of governance who understand risks but are not too risk averse. And I think that's a significant difference between us and a local government or council kind of venue. My experience of local government is it tends to be much more risk averse. So, you know, a couple of months ago, I had a child come to me with her mother. They were known to us. They'd used the centre quite a lot. And they said, we think there's a gap for single parents on Mother's Day. That gap is that, you know, there's no second parent to organise the single parent, the activity for Mother's Day or Special Persons Day if you're from a family with non-binary or trans parents. And could they organise an activity for single parent families? And so I said, yes, have the space. You can organise that because I think that's a really compatible use with what we do. And so they activated the space and we didn't need any staff on board for that. We asked someone who comes here regularly if she'd like to help as a volunteer for that activity. But it was just an example of, you know, by making the space available, great things happen with no resources from ourselves other than saying, yeah, the space is free, use it.
Yeah, awesome. Have you ever encountered any kind of, not backlash, but like a tricky situation when dealing with all of these changes, whether in pricing or because, you know, you try your best to make it accessible to the community, but sometimes there will always be situations where it won't work for everybody. So have you ever encountered or have an experience of how to deal with certain tricky situations?
We did have some minor discontent. When we shifted to SpacetoCo, we also reviewed the pricing for the centre, and we had some groups who for a very long time had been on a really low rate of about $9 an hour for space across all spaces. So it didn't matter what space they booked, they paid $9 an hour. And what we really wanted to do was to actually encourage people to use a space that was the right size for their group. So it's kind of like, because the space is highly sought after, we didn't want groups with 10 people using the hall. We could accommodate 60 people. And so what we did was actually keep the lowest space at $10 an hour for these community groups. And often it was the 12-step groups, self-help groups. And they said, oh, we don't charge, but we just ask, we cover the hall cost with a gold coin donation. And that's kind of like, well, hang on a second. If you're needing a space for 50 people and everyone's making a gold coin donation, then you can pay $20 an hour. But if you only need a space for 10 people, then use the smaller space and you'll only have to pay $10 an hour and you can still cover it. And so when I think, you know, I just had to explain that to people. I had to explain that rationale and that we didn't think it was an unreasonable impost on groups that need a venue that can manage 60 people to actually be making a contribution that covered that. So when I think that was explained to people, they got their head around it. And, you know, the reality is if any group said, you know, this is what we want and what we're trying to achieve, we can't afford it, we would be accommodating. And recently I was accommodating to a parent has organised a play group. There's some teething issues in terms of parents in the play group understanding that in order to cover the kind of hall hire costs, families probably need to kick in $4 each. It's kind of the price of a coffee. A lot of people were sort of putting in $1 or $2, and that was leaving one parent out of pocket. And I don't want that parent being left out of pocket. That doesn't seem fair to me. She's doing all the hard work of facilitating and organising this play group. And so I just discounted 2 of her bookings down to 0 so that she wasn't behind, because the bigger thing that I want is to know that that play group is going to be viable in the longer term. And I'm sure they'll get there, but I want to guarantee that they're still there in November and that she doesn't kind of just drift away because at the end of each month she ends up being $30 or $40 out of pocket.
Wow, that's awesome. That's very inspiring. Have you seen, because you've in your session you talked a lot about the changes that you had to make and certain ways that in your point of view has benefited the community, like even taking out the fence, how it's changed the spaces, has made things a bit more inviting. Are there other ways you've seen community grow in Jika Jika Community Centre, whether that might be like more increase in bookings or engagement in your hall by these groups because of the things that you offer them? Like what other benefits have you seen like through the result?
Yeah, we've had a pretty significant increase in the number of bookings over the last year. It's a bit hard to know, COVID really knocked people out of venues like this, and so things were slow getting back. But I do think that the booking experience that people had before we signed up to SpacetoCo was pretty ordinary. Like I couldn't get my head around it myself, and I thought, well, if I can't get my head around how this system works, I'm not sure how anyone else will. So I always kind of describe SpacetoCo as like the Airbnb of venue hire. And the thing about Airbnb is with these platforms, we're all really familiar with them now. You can use a similar sort of platform to book a car now with Uber Car Share, or book a holiday venue with Airbnb. And because these are platforms that people are becoming more familiar with all the time, I think it's helped that people get on a platform, and because they've been using these other sort of platforms to book things, they know how it works. And certainly for people being able to self-book has made a difference. But the other big difference that we had before was that people used to have to pay, our regular users had to pay upfront for their bookings. And so that meant that they couldn't afford to pay for the whole year. And so they'd book one term at a time. And because we wanted to maintain that, we only opened the bookings up ahead one term at a time. So we wouldn't let people book for the whole year. We only opened the bookings up as the term was approaching. So it was much more cumbersome. Now, because our regular hires don't have to pay until the end of the month, they just book out the whole year. They exclude school holidays most often, or sometimes they include them, or public holidays. They can do all of that. They get invoiced at the end. And so it's meant that there's that sense of stability and people aren't losing their spot as much. So we used to have to juggle this kind of fine dance of the competition for space, because some of our spaces would be double booked if we didn't stop that. And so this has just meant that regular hires can get their bookings in, and then the space is available for casual hires after that.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome to hear that our system has been working for you, because even in your session, you talked about how you were like, oh, we don't try and focus too much of our time in doing admin anymore. And I mean, it's awesome to hear that SpacetoCo has also done that for you, which is exactly why we built this platform. We have Sarah asking and saying she loves how, hold on, scrolling up. I love how you reimagined the smaller room by adding storage. Do you charge for group storage?
Look, this is a work in progress. We're kind of trying to. One of the reasons we're trying to is because storage is not something we've got a huge amount of, and I don't really want people leaving stuff here unnecessarily. So you would have seen one of those earlier photos, there were some red storage cupboards. I had a feeling that some of them were being underused and that people were kind of leaving stuff in there that they weren't using all the time. And so I did send a message out to people saying that from this year or second term that there would be a storage charge, and that would apply per term to anyone who had exclusive use of a cupboard space. That immediately resulted in one group removing half their stuff out of cupboard and just using one shelf instead of the whole cupboard, and that was fantastic. I don't know that I've actually managed to charge anyone yet, because even though I've created it as a separate item, I haven't followed up sufficiently. But in some ways it had the intended use of actually just making people think about their storage a bit more and trying to move some people out. Because ideally, to my way of thinking, I would actually rather not have all the red storage cupboards. But we have, for example, the kids dance group. It's a young woman who's set up her own business. She uses the venue 4 times a week. She has ribbons and hoops and things like that because she's here 4 times a week. It doesn't seem unreasonable to let her keep some stuff here. What we do is encourage people to share stuff. So if they are bringing things in, like she's got some ballet bars, that I've been really clear that if you're going to have something like that here, you have to expect that everyone will use it. Or a music stand, for example, I said, we only need one music stand. We're not going to have everyone having their own music stand. And with the ballet bars, you know, we've used them for our clothes swap. So we said, well, they're here and we're having a clothes swap. We will drape our clothes all over those ballet bars, move them out, give them additional uses. And that's kind of the quid pro quo for someone storing something here.
Hey, smart thinking. Plus also no shame in having to put your mom voice on to get rules done or get rules in the community center. No, that's awesome. I just have one last question before we wrap it up, unless anybody else has any question. Do you have any tips for people who, for example, if people are managing community spaces that are not for profit or don't get funding as much? Do you have any simple tips for them in how to reimagine space that they feel like they won't have to use up money or have to fundraise too much for it?
I would say a lot of the changes that we made, we run on neighbourhood houses, run on the smell of an oily rag. We put in a dishwasher, which resulted in us having to extend the bench. And sure, we had to buy the dishwasher, but the bench extension we did ourselves. We don't expect things to look kind of new and polished. We just expect them to look loved and cared for. And, in my sense, people often like that in the venue. They say it feels cozy, it feels welcoming. And I think that you don't need new and shiny to feel welcoming and inviting. And so that's worth thinking about. But, it fits with our ethos around sustainability also to retrieve and recover stuff. And so we're part of a fabulous group called the Darebin Hard Rubbish Heroes. This is literally an online group of over 10,000 people who give things away and rescue things that might otherwise be unwanted. As a community centre, we make use of that group all the time. If we need something, we just put it out there on Facebook that we need it. And I can guarantee within 24 hours, we'll have it. And I think, it's a good reminder that we're part of the communities that we work in, not separate from them, and that we can encourage and reflect the values of our communities by the way in which we engage in them. And so people love giving stuff to us and we love giving stuff away as well. And I think that also, sends a really positive vibe about the space.
It's awesome. Not me frantically writing notes, because that was just awesome. The two things you said. We don't expect things to look new and polished. We just need them to look loved and cared for. And just a reminder that we are a part of the communities. We're a part of, not separate from them. That's awesome. And we have one last question, I think, from Ian. He said, with the defencing project, have you had more walk-ins looking for a space?
I would say yes, we have. So people have wandered in, and partly that's about how we're using the space too. So we have a Jika Community Dance Club, which is at 10 o'clock on Monday morning. Literally, come and disco with us. Fantastic. You didn't get enough dancing on the weekend, come in at 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, we were running that in the large hall, but we've worked out that actually there's no reason we can't do that in the courtyard if the weather's fine. And so we are literally dancing in the courtyard. And if people walk past on the nature strip, on the footpath, we say, come on in and dance with us. And every so often we'll get someone. Most people don't. But even if they don't come and join the people dancing, they smile and they laugh and it brings joy to their day. And so I think that, don't be scared of being there physically in the space, demonstrating that it's an open space. Also, we are not a sort of provider that delivers what I might call tertiary services in terms of support. But recently we have provided some homelessness support to people. And to give you an example, one day a young woman wandered in and she said, could she charge her phone? And do we have a charger? I said, sure, there's the PowerPoint, charge your phone. Now, she came in actually because she needed some Wi-Fi, and she saw that we had the handmade flags up that said Jika Jika Community Centre. She thought, this community centre, they might have Wi-Fi, might be able to charge my phone. And so we have Wi-Fi, and yes, she could charge her phone. And in conversation, we found out that she was living in her car. And we just started chatting about our programs. Now, she didn't want support with her homelessness. She found out we had a sewing group, and actually she said, I really love to use the sewing machine because I've got some things I want to mend and make. And she spent days over the next few weeks in that little meeting room that we reimagined on a sewing machine, fixing all the stuff and creating stuff. And I thought that was amazing, that this was someone who walked in because they saw the sign and because it was easy to walk in. They walked in for Wi-Fi, and they spent about 6 or 7 days sitting at a sewing machine sewing all their stuff. And I think that's what openness does, and I'm absolutely certain we wouldn't have got that outcome if the fence had still been up.
That's awesome. Thank you once again, Susan, for such a very inspiring and I just really love the session that you gave. You not only shared the story of Jika Jika Community Centre, but you just gave so many beautiful, inspiring, and very practical tools that can help other community venues move forward with just reimagining space and just utilizing how we can really incorporate the community in everything that we do. So as I wrap up, you guys are more than welcome to continue writing on the chat the things that you've loved about Susan's presentation. We already have a few. Susan, you're more than welcome to read through that and bask in the glory of what you've just presented. But while that's happening, I am just going to share with everybody that SpacetoCo has even more free resources for you who are working with any and all types of community venues. That's what we're here for. We're here to support you and share your stories, create resources. A resource that actually popped out to me that relates to what's in Susan's presentation is we recently created a benchmark pricing guide, how you can price your venues with the use of a lot of data research. It's been one of our collab sessions in the past, but we created like an actual downloadable resource, which we will send out to everybody along with Susan's presentation here today in the emails. So we will link all that to you guys. Go check it out. If anything about SpacetoCo was interesting to you guys, or if you wanted to know more about the platform, if you wanted to incorporate it in your community center, if you haven't already, we will also give you guys a link where you can contact us and you can get a free demo from one of our team. Other than that, we just wanted to thank Susan again. Thank you everybody who's tuned in and spent your last hour. And got 10 minutes to spare. And with that, I will leave you guys. Everybody loves a good extra 10 minutes to their day. But again, thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you guys have a good week. Thank you.